Hi, I'm Jim Knotts, President and CEO of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund. Welcome to today's virtual reading of the names. 2022 marks the 40th anniversary of the dedication of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. As part of our commemoration, we'll host an in-person reading of the names at the wall from November 7th through 10th, 2022, when all 58,281 names on the wall will be read aloud. In the lead up to that event, we'll be reading names each day online while sharing the photos of these heroes. For our daily virtual reading, the names of the service members will be read by month and day of death between the years 1956 and 1975 in alphabetical order for the given day. We apologize in advance for any mispronunciations. Know that our readers are doing their best to honor these service members. We hope you'll listen and watch each day and share with others as we remember and honor those who gave their lives during the Vietnam War.
Daniel Owen Abernathy, Anthony Joseph Abruzes, Michael Alberucci, Richard Michael Allard, Edward Ambrose, Richard Allen Anderson, Roger Charles Anderson, William John Anderson Jr., Major Arnold Jr., Edward Ray Arnwine, Charles F. Azara Jr., Dennis Donald Backen, Bernard Philip Bailey, Wayne Roland Baker, James Russell Beatty, Dwayne Russell Bentley, Narciso Berteman Jr., Gordon Harry Blexrode, Carl Lee Borgen, Harold Joseph Brazen, Joseph Emile Brunel, Cecil Wayne Burton, Donald Patrick Caldwell, Michael Shane Kali, Frank Andrew Cason Jr., Richard Paul Kazin, Terry Allen Chase, Joseph Aloysius Clancy, J. C. Clark Jr., Joseph Burnell Como, Michael Lynn Cooper, Thomas Monroe Crow, Paul Michael Daly, Ronald Lee Davis, John Eric Davis, Harold Vernon Derringer Jr., Martin DeGroot, Richard William Devine, Jimmy Michael Dolan, Douglas Scott DeBose, Jimmy Dale Dutcher, Robert Thomas Effa, Bennett Edward Evans, Carol Eugene Fankhauser, Daniel Edward Farron, Patrick G. Fitzsimmons, Randall Scott Fletcher, Joseph Everell Ford III, Stephen Jewel Foster, Roy Allen Fryman, Guadalupe Galindo Jr., Jerry Lawson Jerry, James Arnold Guilford, Frank Allen Gibbon, James Frederick Godsey, William Howard Godecker, Kenneth B. Goff Jr., William Frank Galladay, Danny Eric Goodwin, James T. Griffin Jr., Gary Wingate Grimes, Edward Robert Guest, Dennis Anthony Gunder, Albert R. Gutierrez Jr.,
Barry Newton Hambleton, Donald Deloy Hanson, Billy Joe Harrison, Lonnie Dean Hartsock, William Arthur Heap, Kelly Carl Hines, Dennis Lee Henry, Thomas Franklin Herkins, Robert John Himmler, John Charles Hines, Leslie Edmund Hines III, Ronald Lee Holtzman, Robert Douglas Hughes, Joseph Paul Intihar, – , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , Kurt Carl Jobst, Jr., Asa Thomas Johnson, Gerald Victor Johnson, Ralph Martin Johnson, Michael Edward Jones, Richard Lynn Josendahl, William Dwayne Kaga, Milton Reginald Kennedy, Gary Brewster Kilgore, Louis King, Harold Franklin Klein, Peter Frank Kovach, Robert Joseph Kuzmanko, Frank J. Lacey, Melvin Earl Ladewig, John William Lake, Donald Gary Lammers, Dean Laverne Lang, Dal James Laporte, Robert Michael Lathrop, Jack Bryan Leaf, Joe Louis Lee, Larry Kenneth Leimbach, Renee Lee Malars, Dennis Robert Martin, James Massey, Harry Curtis McCartney, Robert Warren McGill, Roy Duane McLennan, William Newton McMurtry, Ricardo Mesa, John Stephen Michael, Joseph John Milano, John Edward Miller, Leonard F. Mogenborg, Edward James Monahan, Jr., Otha Lee Monger, John Patrick Morgan, Jr., Grat Jelaine Myers, Louis Nance, David Charles Ney, Jesus Diaz Nieto, Jr., John Sylvester Nutwell, Jerry Warren Nye, James Bruce O'Kane, Lupe P. Ochoa, Gary Allen Oman, Jose Angel Ortiz,
Norbert Alvin Overcamp, Jr., Richard Anthony Parker, Robert Lee Perry, Frank Edward Petrick, Warren Walter Pfefferly, John Thomas Povey, Ronald Lewis Powell, Donald Ray Purant, David Nilsson Rasmussen, Charles Harold W. Reed, Jr., William Francis Ridge, Bobby Lee Roberts, Herman David Robinson, William Eugene Rodkey, Felix Rodriguez, John Paul Rowland, Jose F. Rosado Borges, Paul Edward Rudine, Jr., Ronald Lee Runkle, William Patrick Ryland, Thomas Alvin Sagan, Jerry Joseph Sanders, James Edgar Sanders, Jr., John Daniel Sanderson, Charles Harold Schaefer, Richard John Schell, Robert Charles Schell, Jr., Larry Shea, Ronald David Shockley, William King Shoup, Sheldon Silverman, Isaiah Simmons, Dennis Michael Skagerbo, Richard Smith, Billy Smith, Gilbert Smith, Jr., George W. Smith, Jr., Stephen Francis Snyder, Carmela Sosa Giraldo, Raymond Paul Spindler, Thomas W. Staley, Jr., James Nelson Steen, William James Tarcy, James LaFawn Tart, Bobby Lee Tarter, Otha Theander Thompson, Bruce Garland Tyndall, Robert Richard Tolpa, John Henry Van Wyck, Ivan L. Vincent Jr., James Joseph Votava Jr., Ronald Lemon Wofford, Sterling Aidan Wall, Richard Frank Wallace, James Waller, Richard Alexandra Ware, Richard Joseph White, Donald Ray Weist, Thomas Henry Williams, Richard Allen Willis, Charles Rembert Watt, Manuel Gutierrez Ibarra, John Randall Zimmerman.